what would you do if your health was restored by doing the opposite of everything we were taught? You guys, my name is Michelle Hurn, and I'm a registered and licensed dietitian, and I'm the author of the book, The Dietitian's Dilemma. So I want to welcome you to the low-carb lifestyle and practitioner series. And if you haven't already, make sure you download our lifestyle quick start guide. You can do that easily here. Also, please make sure you sign up for our weekly email so you can know when these videos are coming out. Also, please feel free to ask me questions, you guys. Every video, I want to answer one of your questions, and I'm happy if we get a lot of questions, maybe we'll do just a video with questions. So today we're going to talk about why it took several years of my life to write a book. You guys, I wrote a book called The Dietitian's Dilemma. And one of the reasons I wrote this book is because, unfortunately, I lost my health. My health was really, really bad. But like I said, before we get into that, I do want to address a question. So I got a question. The question was, can you use a low carbohydrate diet for conditions of your GI, such as irritable bowel syndrome or ulcerative colitis? So we actually have a lot of anecdotal studies that show that ketones are very healing to the GI system. So obviously you want to contact your doctor, but I highly recommend if you are somebody suffering with ulcerative colitis, irritable bowel syndrome, or any GI disorder, get with a ketogenic coach or ketogenic nutritionist and see if you can't, see if that doesn't help your symptoms. A lot of people have had complete reversal of symptoms, even been able to get off medication. So absolutely, it can absolutely benefit a lot of people, especially people with gastrointestinal issues. All right, so let me share my story. If you're not familiar with my story, you guys, I had a very serious eating disorder when I was 12 years old. I was 5 feet tall and 57 pounds, so I ended up in inpatient treatment. Although I was weight restored, I was prescribed the standard American diet. In treatment, we ate lots of grains, we ate lots of vegetables, we ate lots of lean protein. We didn't get a lot of fat. I also was on a tube feeding system for 24 hours a day. The number one ingredients in tube feeding formulas, actually, they're still the same today over 25 years later, are maltodextrin, corn syrup solids, soy protein, and canola oil. And so although I became weight restored, I had chronic anxiety and depression. And I was just told as a young person, this is what you're going to deal with your entire life. So I thought, this is just my cross to bear, right? This is what I'm going to have to deal with. And then as I became an adult, wanted to become a dietitian, I saw things in the hospital setting that just didn't make sense to me. I saw people that had been suffering with diabetes for decades, but they were being fed lots of carbohydrates and then given insulin. And I would simply ask my preceptors, I would say, well, why don't we just give them less carbohydrates if their body can no longer tolerate carbohydrates? And I was like, oh no, Michelle, everybody has to have carbohydrates. They're necessary for human health. We'd go to the ICU, and I remember flipping over those tube feeding. I'm like, these are the same ingredients that I had. And at that point, it was, 13 years ago. Now it's, over 25 years. Why are we feeding people who've been in traumatic accidents these high carbohydrate, high sugar, potentially inflammatory ingredients? And I was just told it doesn't matter. It's just protein and calories. And I was a long distance runner. I was a marathon runner, and I really wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials. But unfortunately, in 2019, all of a sudden my body stopped recovering to the point where I couldn't go even on a couple-mile run without breaking out in cold sweats. My anxiety got to the point that I couldn't even work anymore. I had to call in several days. I was having panic attacks. And at that point, I was eating 300, 400 grams of carbs a day because I was an athlete, right? I was told I had to eat these carbohydrates. Well, kind of the final moment was I had a really rough day at the hospital, working at the hospital, and I came home early. And then I woke up, you guys, at like 2 in the morning, and it just felt like my body was on fire. I went to 7-Eleven at 2 in the morning, got ice, made an ice bath, sitting in my bathtub with ice. And, finally my wife came in and was like, maybe we should do something differently. And so at that moment, I decided I was no longer going to be a runner. I was just going to adopt a low carbohydrate diet because intuitively I knew just eating all these carbs and sugar didn't make me feel good. But I had no idea what was about to happen in my life. So over the next several weeks, I ate a mostly meat and fat-based diet. And I noticed my muscles didn't hurt anymore, but I thought, that's just, I'm not running anymore. But on the third week, my wife said, this is the best your anxiety has been in the 11 years that I've known you. It was true. I no longer had chronic anxiety. My muscle pain was gone. I wasn't having panic attacks. I was sleeping through the night. My skin healed. I started feeling stronger, and I started to be able to dream. Maybe I could run again. So my life completely changed. And from then, of course, I was so passionate. I went and started studying. I pulled up every trial I could find. I was working in the hospital, so I had access to, the logs of all these different clinical trials. And I was shocked. There was so much information on low-carb diets. And I'm fortunate to know Dr. Eric Westman was the first person that told me, Michelle, we have more data on low carb diets showing they're sustainable, their efficacy, they work, and they're sustainable than any other diet out there, than vegan diets, vegetarian, standard American. And so I just became so passionate. I thought, surely I'll stay in the hospital setting and I'll be able to advocate this way of eating. But of course, I was immediately told, no, you can't teach this. You have to teach the standard American diet, that high carb diet, this diet that isn't working. And so in my book, I decided to talk about different disease states that I had seen that I knew a low carbohydrate diet could help. And those include diabetes. I had patients, you guys, that suffered with diabetes for 20 years. And, we now have clinical trials that people can lower their A1C to where they're no longer diabetic in 10 weeks. 10 weeks. I had patients that had legs amputated, you guys, teeth falling out, dementia. And then we talk about mental health. Once again, like I said, my lifelong anxiety was better. We're going to have clinical trials soon on more mental health, depression and anxiety. Eating disorders. I just did a long talk on how important I think people who are either prolonged periods of starvation, like anorexia or bulimia, binge eating disorder, they really need to heal your intestinal epithelium and your brain. And you can't do that when you're eating lots of carbs and sugar. Also, heart disease. That's kind of the big thing. Oh, you can't eat all this saturated fat. It's bad for your heart. Well, we know that's a myth. We have lots of studies and resources that say that's not true. Humans were eating meat and fat through entire evolution and had no chronic disease. We introduced carbohydrates, sugar, and processed foods, and heart disease went through the roof. I also have a chapter about where the nutrition guidelines came from, because I think if you understand how this happened, it's more like, oh, this is why we can't change. This is why people are afraid of low carb diets versus embracing them. So, I took several years, I left the hospital because I wasn't able to teach in the hospital. And I remember before I left, I had a dietitian tell me, don't do this. You're never going to be able to work in the hospital again if you advocate against the standard American diet, and you're never going to make enough money to support yourself. She wasn't wrong about the money thing. I took a very big paycheck cut when I first left the hospital. I ended up doing just some labor because I was trying to make it while I was writing my book. But you guys, I can't tell you what an honor and a privilege it is to advocate a way of health and a way of eating that actually works. And I'm actually seeing people heal. So you guys, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this video. Like I said, my name is Michelle Hurn. I'm a registered dietitian. Oh, I guess I should share real briefly too. Like I said, I started to be able to dream about running again. Could I run on a low carb diet? Well, you guys, I wasn't just able to run. I actually have done 2 ultra marathons now, and I've won them both. So now I'm dreaming of being highly competitive again, which is really exciting. So you guys, if you haven't already, once again, please make sure you subscribe below, leave comments, leave questions. Also sign up for our email list. Go to SFuelsGoLonger.com. You can get a sample pack of SFuels, if you're interested in some low carbohydrate nutrition. And yeah, let's just keep this thing going. I really appreciate your time. Y'all have a good day.